We're here with Senator James Lankford. He's on the Committee on Homeland Security and the Select Committee on Intelligence. He's joining us to talk about the terrorist attacks in Paris. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for coming and being here with us. I guess the biggest question people have is, are there any threats to U.S. cities right now?
Yeah, there is an ongoing threat that's constant. ISIS is very unique. They're very different than Al-Qaeda that planned spectacular attacks that gathered people together, trained them, and sent them out. ISIS is always probing and looking for someone who thinks like them, and they'll constantly reach out to them on social media and say, if you think like us, you should kill like us. Here are some ideas, and do it locally to where you are. So they're trying to pull people into their caliphate in Syria and Iraq, and if they can't get them to come fight in Syria and Iraq, they just encourage them to fight wherever they are. So it's a very different terror threat than what we have faced historically in America.
And as we get new information, we're hearing about one of the attackers may have come into Europe as a Syrian migrant. And of course, the president has said we're going to take on up to 10,000 Syrian migrants next year. Is this something we should be concerned about repeating itself here?
Absolutely, we should. It's one of those things that we have to be attentive to. Europe has said that we're going to open it up. If they land on their shores, they're going to find some way to process them. We're not on that same level of exposure as they are, and we should not be. We should be able to bring in migrants that we know who they are, we know their background, we're able to evaluate them. Many of these are individuals that are leaving the different camps that have been set up and have been in those camps for years, and we're very aware of the issues. I've also encouraged the president through different letters and our exchanges back and forth that America is uniquely set up to take on folks fleeing for religious reasons. It's one of the core values that we have as a country. So Christian Syrians that are fleeing out of that area is a good example of people that are fleeing that area based on their own life and threat of their life. We know many of their backgrounds, we know who they are. It'd be a reasonable thing to be able to take them in because we know them.
So we shouldn't, in your opinion, sort of isolate ourselves because of the fear of the migrants?
No, the United States has brought in 70,000 refugees a year and has done it year after year. We have a very interesting process to be able to check people. If we cannot evaluate who they are and we don't know their background, then we should not bring them into the United States. Just because they are a refugee doesn't mean they should end up here. So we should continue to bring on refugees as we typically do year after year, but we should not do it unless we know their background, know who they are.
Do we already have a different plan in place to assess their backgrounds than they do in Europe?
We do. We have a very different background check than what Europe has, and it needs to stay that way, or quite frankly, it needs to continue to elevate. There's a tendency of the administration right now to say we need to bring in more people. To do that, that means you shortcut your system. We should not shortcut our system to evaluate backgrounds.
As far as the attack yesterday, it was coordinated and sophisticated. Originally, it looked like people were uncertain if it was ISIS because of the coordination. Should this be looked at as an intelligence failure?
It's one of those things that we evaluate seriously in the United States, and they will, and they'll go back and pull back and look at all the information they had while they were in France as well. This is where you really need intelligence. And people ask me all the time, I'm on the Intelligence Committee, what is the role of intelligence? The role of intelligence is really to evaluate the chatter that's happening worldwide and the attacks that are coming to your own country. I have a real issue with us listening to Americans and evaluating what we're doing. We have absolute constitutional protections. I do not have that belief of what's happening worldwide. I want to know who's attacking us before they actually come to attack us so we can stop it. We saw this in May of this year when we had individuals in Syria recruiting people that thought like them in Arizona and encouraged them to go to Garland, Texas, and to shoot up an event where they had a cartoon contest for Mohammed. So this is not something new to the United States. What happened in Paris was planned in the United States. The difference was we were able to pick up the message coming in from Syria to the United States, and we're aware of what was happening, and we were able to intercede. So when they stepped out of their vehicle in Garland, Texas, they were stopped before they got away from the curb, rather than actually get into the building, because they were ready to go, exactly like the setup of what happened in Paris. So the intelligence operations do help us tremendously with keeping Americans secure, but it's not a perfect system. There are flaws in the system, and we have to evaluate those.
And we spoke earlier about threats in the United States. Are there specific or credible threats, or is it just a general alert we should be on?
It's a general alert at this point. We do not have specific and credible threats in the United States, but we do stay very aware. ISIS, again, is going after the lone wolf. They're going after individuals that think like they do, that particular brand of Sunni Islam, and they're trying to motivate them and say, if you think like us, you should kill like us. Go out and kill someone and then post on your social media site our logo and tell them that you're with us. So that's a very different threat than what we faced in the past. So you often don't hear the chatter worldwide about it. It just suddenly happens. So it's something we do have to pay attention to. It's something Americans pay attention to consistently, and it's one of those areas where Americans uniquely have the right of the Second Amendment. We're able to carry weapons with us, and that's a very different threat for the terrorists as well. When they walk into a concert in Paris, they know no one's armed in there but they are. When they come into the United States, they don't know who is actually carrying a weapon. So it's a very different dynamic for that terrorist. They also know that. They prepare for that as well. So we have not only intelligence operations, but individual citizens also standing up and defending ourselves.
And I think Donald Trump had mentioned that today about how America is uniquely safer in that respect, and having armed citizens that could be anywhere at any moment. Do you think that actually does keep us safer?
No, it does make a big difference. When people consider what is a quote-unquote soft target, walking into a restaurant, walking into a concert, overseas and in many other areas, versus here in the United States, it is a different opinion and a different level of preparation for the terrorist. Now, the challenge that we have in the intelligence community and the challenge that we have as Americans and our tremendous law enforcement, both state, local, county, federal law enforcement, is they're constantly watching and trying to be able to track ways that we can both protect Americans' constitutional freedoms. There's no reason for us to be able to monitor Americans, but there's also the chatter that you want to be able to pick up and see, is someone planning an attack? There's a big difference between I don't like someone and I plan to kill someone. And we've got to be able to find a way to be able to pick that up and still protect constitutional freedoms, as our intelligence community and our law enforcement does every day in trying to monitor that.
Now, France, President Hollande has called this an act of war. He said that France will respond mercilessly, and they're already striking targets in Iraq and Syria against ISIS. So stepping that up, if it could potentially mean troops on the ground from France, what would that mean for the United States and NATO allies?
The biggest challenge that we face right now in the entire region, and everyone says, why aren't the Sunni nations engaging? It's because the president hasn't articulated a clear strategy. Over the past 4 years, the president has multiple times publicly come out and stated, we don't have a clear strategy yet for what's happening in Syria. They're hoping it will kind of resolve itself. The challenge of that is, in the past, it's always been the American taking the lead role. We left the vacuum there so long, Russia is now stepping in, and they're trying to take the lead role. They want to be the big player in the Middle East. That is not in our national interest for Russia to then be the big player in the Middle East that destabilizes a region that's already unstable enough. Many of the Sunni nations are waiting on us, and the president has yet to articulate what is the plan to actually bring stability to Syria. What is the plan to actually isolate ISIS? And currently the president over and over again says one simple thing: we're going to contain them, and then we're going to try to work on a plan of what happens next. Well, they're not contained. They're in Libya, they're in Tunisia, they're in Afghanistan, they're in Pakistan, they're allied with Boko Haram in Africa. They continue to spread across that region. This is not a contained threat. This is an ever-expanding threat, and if we just ignore them, it is to our peril.
If we have troops on the ground, NATO or U.S. troops on the ground there, do you have concerns of it becoming a proxy war with Iran and Russia, as you mentioned, already there, and becoming a larger international conflict?
This is already a proxy war. Right now in Syria, Bashar Assad is propped up by Putin from Russia and by Iran and by Hezbollah from Lebanon. That's who's the main support group for what's happening in Syria. Without Hezbollah, without Iran, without Russia, Assad would have been defeated a long time ago, but he has them. And so this has become a larger war. Turkey is trying to figure out where they're going to engage based on what America is going to do. Jordan is trying to determine what they're going to do based on what America is going to do. Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these countries that we say, why aren't they helping us? They're waiting on us. And until the president articulates a clear strategy, they will not move.
And reading the headlines yesterday, when I was going through what was going on in the Middle East, Jihadi John Mwazi looked like he'd been taken out. A couple cities, Sinjar and Al-Hol, looked like ISIS had lost control of them. Do you think this Paris attack was retaliation for that?
I don't. I don't think this is retaliation for what happened with Jihadi John. This was too well coordinated. There's a long period of time that it would take to actually plan something like this, to get the preparation, get the materials in place, to know their sites. This is not a knee-jerk response. So I think this is we're going to discover in time how many weeks it really took to be able to plan this and lay this out, but this does not look like a knee-jerk response.
And of course, our thoughts and prayers are with the people in Paris. But is there anything we can learn from this to better protect ourselves here at home?
Yeah, both the value of the intelligence operations of what we're doing internationally to try to stop what's coming at the United States, being attentive to refugees that are coming into the United States, being attentive on our own borders and people moving across the borders, as they have seen in that area. The quick movement of people that they don't know who they are across their own borders is a real threat. And then for us just to be able to monitor things as citizens as well. It's always very important to us. Our state and local law enforcement step up all over the country. They're very attentive and that they're very good at what they do. And so the way that we can affirm law enforcement, to be able to thank them and to be able to assist them in the process, is also very helpful to us. But ultimately, we have to understand this is a very real threat. These are individuals that are around the world that they mean to dominate the world. They have their own particular brand of Islam, and they won't tolerate anyone who has a different belief in Islam than them, or Christian or Jew or any other faith. They're willing to kill them and run over them and to dominate them. The number of people that are the fighters that are actually in Syria and that are in Iraq, that are the ISIS fighters people talk about, they would completely fill the TU Stadium. It's not a huge number. And you think that's not a big number. If you went to Stillwater, or if you went to Norman, they would fill that stadium, and that's it. That's the whole number worldwide that are fighting for them. But they dominate those regions by being so ruthless and by being so brutal. People are afraid of them. They're trying to spread that same belief in other areas. If they can be ruthless and brutal, they think that people will kowtow to them and will back up. We've got to show force to force on this. They do not understand diplomacy. We have to actually defeat them.
Do you think we need U.S. boots on the ground more so than just the special forces?
I think we need a clear strategy to articulate what we're going to do in the air, that we're not going to just try to annoy them from the air or try to limit their power. I think we will need special operating troops there, or that will continue to bring the fight to all of Western Europe and to the United States. I think we have to be able to lay out what is the number of troops that are coming from all these different Sunni nations as well that should be on the ground. And until we can articulate that strategy, no other country is going to engage. I do affirm it should be the nations around that region that should have the boots on the ground. The problem is, until we actually put that coalition together and lead it, it won't happen.
So you support the president's decision recently to move the 50 special forces troops?
I think the 50 number is going to be painfully small. I think they're going to be very limited in what they can actually do. And what I want to do is have a number that's sufficient both to protect themselves so they're not vulnerable when they're on the ground, and to be able to carry out the attacks that are needed. When you have 50, they have to both carry out attacks and they have to protect each other day and night. That's a very limited, small group to be able to do that. I want to have a number that's sufficient enough for them to be able to take care of themselves and whatever needs that they have while they're on the ground.
And this next issue is back home in Oklahoma. We just had the Veterans Day parade, and we had CARE Oklahoma. There was a big backlash against them entering a float in the parade. I spoke with several people who were linking CARE with, groups overseas, and CARE denies that that's something that's gone on. When we speak about radical Islam, I think some people are conflating these different groups together. What would you say to some people who would be suspicious of a group like
Sure,
CARE?
yeah. CARE's challenge is they've been trying to separate themselves from Muslim Brotherhood in that connection, and that is their own responsibility to be able to articulate how they're different than the Muslim Brotherhood and how they were founded in the pathway from that. The bigger issue is America is not anti-faith of any faith. We believe that any individual can be a Christian, a Jew, have no faith, be Muslim, be Buddhist, whatever faith that they choose to be. That's a basic constitutional right that's protected. But there's a difference between I have a certain faith and that faith causes me to say I want to take over the government of any country that I serve in. That's been the challenge for Americans, to be able to push back and say, I know you may have a particular set of beliefs in Islam that is more consistent with this caliphate fight that's happening in Syria and Iraq. That may be a belief that's carried over in an action. We believe in protecting the rights of every person to practice their faith, but you cannot then carry that faith out towards the death of other fellow citizens or to try to overthrow the government as well. So I would affirm individuals that are Muslim, if they choose to be Muslim, that is their free choice as Americans. But if they choose to then practice something that subjugates other citizens or presses down the basic rights and humanity of other individuals, then that is something we have to step up and speak out against. We value humanity as Americans. And if you have an individual that doesn't value humanity or modern technology or freedom that we experience, that's a big difference.
And as we wrap things up here, just personally being contacted by family members, people want to know basically, are we safe? And when we talk about foreign policy, it's very complicated in the Middle East, obviously. What would you say to constituents who just want to know, honestly, are we at risk? Or are we safe right now?
We are a nation that has a war moving around us. We're very similar to what we were decades ago when Al-Qaeda had declared war on us, and we basically pretended that they didn't really exist, that they were just a fly, they were way over there and it wasn't relevant. These are individuals that do mean to do us harm. They plan to bring attacks to us. If they can find a weakness and a time to do that, they will do that. And they will be persistent. And the longer that we allow them to plan and to coordinate and to train and to build strength, the more deadly their attacks will be. And that is the challenge. At what point do Americans determine this is a group of individuals intentionally planning to do harm to us, that talk about it, that plan for it, that train for it? At what point do we say, we're not going to wait until you fire, we're going to actually bring the fight to you?
All right. Senator Lankford, thanks for your time.